Hi, I'm Kieran Venison, Senior Software Engineer, and today in my first video we're going to be setting up and learning the basics of style components. At the same time, we're going to build some smart themes which can detect the user's operating system colour and theme your website to match that. An example of what we're building can be found on my personal website, so before we start I'll show you a quick demo of what we're going to be trying to achieve. So if you look on the right hand side here, we've got my personal website. This is running a dark theme at the moment, and that is coming directly from my system preferences. So if I go to general and change the theme to light, you'll see that the website also updates to a light theme. Change it back to dark, we go back to dark. And that's because we've got some watchers in JavaScript that are watching for this change, and we'll update the site live. We also have a method of changing the theme manually on the page, just in case somebody doesn't actually want it to be a dark theme. So when you toggle that, you can go back and forth between dark and light. Once you've toggled it to light, it will overwrite your operating system preferences, and if you ever come back to this page or refresh it, it will remain on the light theme. So, to do this, we're using style components. So we're going to set up style components, we're going to set up some basic global styles, we're going to set up your theme provider, and that is used to pass theme around the state, to pass theme state around the application, We're going to componentize and style some buttons to show you how to implement style components on a new React component. And we're going to set up this auto theming so that you can choose the theme based off the user's operating system preferences. And that's pretty much it. So this is a live, it's not live, but it's a live code along. I'm planning on doing no pauses so you can see how problems are solved in real world development. So with that in mind, I will quickly run you over the application. So if you go to github.com, KieranMV95, styled components auto theme, the link will be in the description, and clone the starter files repository. So you can do that just by clicking code and either cloning it through Git or downloading the zip file manually. Once you've got that project locally, you can open it in your preferred IDE and have a look through the files. So I'm running through the solution files at the moment, but you will be using the starter files. So if I just cd into the solution, that's already in it, perfect, and run an npm install, it's the first thing you'll want to do. You'll be in the starter files obviously, and that will just install the packages. So at the moment the packages are really simple, it's just React, React DOM, and Parcel Bundler. So Parcel Bundler is blazing fast, zero configuration web application bundler. And I've used Parcel just because it does what it says on the tin. It's really fast and there is zero configuration. So if you look inside the scripts, you have start, and that is just calling parcel static index.html. If we take a look at the index.html, that is a very simple shell of the application, and then we call the script index.js, which is our React application. Parcel can basically grab this, figure out everything it needs, work out that it's ES6, and just get it all built and running for you. So yeah, we don't have to do that all ourselves. It's a really minimal setup. So if we look at that index.html, it calls index.js. If we go into there, this is our React application. So we're just rendering this into that app ID in the static HTML file. And it's a header, a home page, and a footer. Try to keep the application as small as possible for the purpose of demoing style components and not setting up an entire React application and messing about with that. So the header is a very simple header. Contains a navigation with a list with 4 links. They're not actually links because we're not setting up any routing in this application, it's just to demo what a header would look like. Then we have the footer, which just says style components and gets the date. And then we have the home page. And the home page is very similar to the basic style components website. So we've got the style components logo, tagline, description, and 2 links to the GitHub and documentation. 2 buttons, to the GitHub and documentation. And these we're going to style up using style components. So at the moment, it's a very, very basic website. So before we continue, let's get the packages installed that we need for style components. So once you've cd'd into the starter files, you can do an npm install save, and we're going to install styled components, and we're going to install styled Normalize. And Normalize, if you've not used it before, is a CSS library which just normalizes all the foundational parts of a website across browsers so that everything will look uniform and the same, because sometimes you have slight differences between Safari, Firefox and Chrome. This will just make it the same throughout all of them. So whilst they're installing, we'll start setting up the style components. So first of all, we want to apply some global styles to our whole application, and them global styles will be things like the styled normalize and anything we say want to throw on the body or HTML tags such as font properties. So first of all, let's go into our source directory and create a new folder. And that new folder is just going to be called styles. Inside here, we're going to create a new component, and that's going to be globalstyles.js. Inside globalstyles.js, we're going to import create global styles from style components, and then create the actual component. So global styles equals create global styles, and then open up the backticks and export that component. So export default global styles, and this is where all our global styles are going to live. Now, them packages have installed, so we can start the application. So if you run npm start, which is just running the parcel static index.html, it will start up your server and then display where it is running. Usually localhost 1234, unless you've already got something running on there. So if we go to localhost 1234, you'll see our lovely website. And here we have that navigation which talked about earlier, the image, header, description, buttons and the footer. Let's apply our global styles to them components. So if we go back to the index.js file, the root index in the source where our application lives, we can import our new global styles component. So if we import global styles from styles, global styles, global styled styles. Let's just check that I've named that correctly inside the styles. Yes, I have. And then we basically open it up like we would any other normal React component in here and just close it off. And now we have implemented some global styles. Obviously nothing's changed in the website. You may have saw it flash to say that the hot reloading is working, but we haven't got any styles in here yet. So just as an example that it's working, we'll set the body's background color to red. And it hasn't worked. Typo. Joys of non-edited videos. So there we are, background color red. So now you can see that that global styles is effectively working. As I said, we want to install styled normalize. So we've already installed it through npm, but now we need to inject it into our global styles. There's two ways of doing this, and I'll show you both ways basically, in which I prefer and why. So the first way you can do it is import styled normalize from styled normalize, and do it the same way we've implemented our global styles, like this. And I've done something incorrect. Let's have a look at styled normalize. I imagine it's just a naming thing that I've done wrong. So, yep. It is a named export, not a global. If we do normalize, like that, we should now have the normalize added. Again, not much has changed, but it's just to make sure that everything's uniform across browsers, so you don't really see much change when you implement styled normalize. That's one way of doing it. I'm not a massive fan of this way, and the reason I'm not a fan of this way is because we just pollute in our application with more style-based things. And this isn't a problem, but some people like to split it out this way, and it gets quite messy looking when you have more things in there. So you might have typography, you might have a grid system, and it starts getting quite large for things that are only for styles. So I tend to just leave my global styles as the only one like that. So if we want the normalize this way and just have our global styles imported in the root like this, we have to import normalize into here. So if we import, and I think it is a very similar way to how we've just done it, but we don't import a capital M normalize style components, we import normalize lowercase like this. And the reason we do it lowercase like this is because of how we've done it here. So here we create a global style. Style components also has a method called CSS. And when we do CSS, it means we can inject it into another global style. So here we might do const grid equals CSS and write some grid styles for .container. Width is 500 pixels. And then if we use that CSS one, we can just inject the grid straight into our global styles like that. And then once we import that into index, that will already have our grid and things like the normalize in it. So let's implement normalize that way. And this is by far my favorite way of doing it because it means you only have one import for all your styles, and it's really easy to just look at this file and think, oh, there's my global styles. And you go into global styles and right, that's implementing normalize. So it's really easy to use. So now we've got normalize implemented, let's add some of our own styles. So inside the index.html, you may have noticed that we're importing Google Fonts Open Sans, and underneath that we have the actual font family rule for implementing it. So if we copy that out and delete that line, we can create another file in styles, and we'll just call that typography.js. Try and spell it correctly. Then inside there, we will create a rule to implement in our global styles. So let's import CSS from style components. And then we can say const typography equals CSS, and here's where we can put our rules. So this one's going to go straight onto the body. Just say font family open sans serif. Set the global font size to 16 pixels and line height to 1.25, and we'll set the color to black. So let's export this. So export default. Typography. I cannot type. But you were screaming at me, seeing that typo from the very beginning. And then go back to our global styles, and we'll import that the same way that we have imported normalize above. But obviously ours is not a named export, it's the default. So import typography from typography. And now we can just inject that in the same way that we have our normalize. Ooh. Okay, no auto completion today. I think there is a slight mistake here. No wonder there's no typos. So if we go back, you can now see that we're using the Open Sans font. And if we inspect that, we go to the body, you see our global styles have been applied as if we just applied it like any normal way without using style components. Perfect. So variables is the next part I wanted to cover, and you can use the theme provider provided by style components to do this, but I don't tend to use the variables that they provide, and there's a simple reason for this. It's heavier than CSS's native variables, so I'll implement native variables, I'll implement CSS variables, but there will be some style component variable stuff mentioned after when we go to implement the theme, so I'm not going to skip it entirely. So let's create a new file, variables.js, sorry, and we're going to essentially do the same thing we've done with the typography. We might as well just copy that straight out of typography. We want to name both the typographies to variables, and then we want to create our variables in here. So root, and then we'll create our first two variables. We'll do background color, and we'll just set that to be black. And then we'll also create our copy color, and we'll set that to be white. So it's a shorthand since they're solid colors. And now we go back to our global styles and we import them variables. So again, might as well just copy typography. Then last but not least, variables. Perfect. So now we have them imported. Let's import that above typography because we can make use of them inside of typography then. So now go back to typography and say our color is going to use our CSS variable, copy color, and our background. And so background isn't really a typography thing, so we'll implement the background in the global styles. If we go here and go to body, set the background to background color. I think I named it that. I've already forgotten. Perfect. So I actually did them the wrong way round. So perfect. So there we have our CSS variables being used inside our typography and our global styles. So now we have all that together, let's style up a bit of this website just so it doesn't look as horrendous as it does right now. So first of all, we want to style up our index page. Actually no, let's style up the header first since it's at the top of the page. So to style individual components, we don't use the create global styles or the CSS that exports from style components. We use its default export, styled. If we import styled from style components, we can then create components that we style here. So we can create headers, navs, URLs, and Is, all of the above. So const header styles. And again, this is done like React components because they do actually export a component and you apply your styles to that. So say equals styled, and then if you add a dot on there, you get all the things we can create. So we're just creating a div. Oh no, actually not, we're creating a header. So if we write styled.header, that will mean the component we get back from this will be a HTML header. So if we copy that, we can replace our header with it, and we can work away. So what you can do is create individual components for every single thing. So we could do nav, styles, style.nav, things like that, and keep going down to making URLs and individual LIs. But I find that way it ends up getting quite large and complicated. So I tend to create the most global component of the page, like the wrapping elements or header styles, and then I just nest it down as you would in normal CSS, like that. I find this way it's just a little bit neater and it's a little bit easier to read overall. So first of all, what do we want our header styles to look like? So we don't want the bullet points next to our URL, so let's set the list style type to none, and then we'll remove the margin and the padding. And now we've just got essentially a plain list with no styling, where we'll display it as flex. And we will put a gap of 2 rem, which is, a gap is now working in flex. It's recently been added. You used to have to start messing with padding and margin, but much better now we have this. And we will align justify content, center. So we get a nice centered navigation, and that didn't work. So let's have a look why. Well, align. What have I done wrong? Maybe it's align content. Oh, no, I'm not looking at the page. There we go. So justify content center. we'll add a bit of padding around the actual navigation. Let's add some padding at the top and bottom of it, just to give it a bit of breathing room. And then we'll just pump up the font size a little bit of the line, so we'll go to 1.2 red. It's a little bit big actually, let's go to 1.1. Perfect, so we've got an okay looking navigation. Let's just add the hover styles in there so it looks more like a realistic navigation. So cursor, we will set to pointer, and then we will add hover state. So if you've ever used Sass before, you can essentially do a similar thing by using the ampersand symbol. So I'll write it out first and then I'll explain a bit of what this does. Say text, decoration, underline. Now when we hover, oh, no, oh yeah, we just needed time to refresh. When we hover, we get the underline. And this may look a little bit weird, but all it is doing is, I consider the ampersand to be append hover. So if we wrote this normally, we would have this. ULLI hover. Like that. So that ampersand is just a quick way to say, append this to the existing statement that we have. So ULLI hover. And you can do this with other things, and you can nest like li inside of this and put these styles inside of there, but nesting for nesting's sake usually isn't the best practice, and it can get really complicated and really messy very quickly. So I tend to only nest when it's going to be for hover styles, focus styles, active styles, things like that. It's just to keep it really neat, and it means that if another developer jumps into this, you can very quickly understand what's going on. Perfect, so we've got our header styles in, and very simple styles, we might as well leave it there. Now, let's go to our footer. And these are going to be even more simpler. So again, I'm going to import styled from style components, and we're going to create the footer. So const footer styles equals styled dot footer, and then we can throw our styles in here. First, let's just replace footer with footer styles, refresh. So you can't actually see our footer at the moment, so let's get rid of this. Lovely. And all I'm going to do to this is add a text align. Oops, text align center. Put that there just for my own sanity. Perfect, so very simple website structure so far. We've got the header, we've got the footer. One thing that we've got here which I don't like is that the footer is stuck to the bottom of the actual content. So if the footer's here and there's a bit of content in between and then the header, we want the footer to go right to the bottom. We don't want it to stick halfway up the page because it just doesn't look very nice and then it's not consistent on other pages. So let's work on that. So if we go to index.js, we'll see we have three components being rendered: the header, the home page, and the footer. And this global styles component doesn't actually render into the page as it's a global styles component, so we can kind of just forget that exists because it doesn't render any actual DOM content. So what we can do is, for my own sanity, I like to wrap the main part of a website in a main tag just for semantics, and then we'll import styled here. Import styled from style components, and then we'll create a new style which is going to wrap the header, main and footer, do some CSS grid magic, and then make sure the footer always stays at the bottom unless there's content and it overflows. So to do that, we'll create a const, we'll call it grid style, container style actually. Container styles makes sense, and then we'll equal styled dot, just a plain old div. Then inside this, we're going to create our grid. So display grid. I'll write this out and then explain it after I've written it, so it'll make more sense then. So we want to do grid template rows without all the typos. I'm going to do auto, 1FR auto, and then we want to set the min height to be 100 viewport height. If we save that, we forgot to wrap it. So if we wrap all our application in container styles, throw them in there, you'll now see that our footer is perfectly at the bottom and we have no scroll bar, so it's not gone too far. What we can do to test this is we can add UL with an LI 1. And just throw a few more of them in, and then once it breaks the width, the height of the page, the footer will remain at the bottom. But if we don't have all of these, the footer will know that it needs to still stick to the bottom. And how this works is we've set the height of the actual container, so the whole website, to be 100 viewport height. So the minimum height it's going to be is from the top to the very bottom here. And then we've made this a grid, and the 3 grid elements are the header, the main, and the footer. So by setting auto, that's just taking up the height of what the component actually is. So if we inspect this, you'll see that, put that to the right, you'll see that the header's height is 85 pixels and the footer's height is 52 pixels. So auto means that, okay, the header will take up 85 pixels, the footer will take up, I think it was 25 or something, or 20 pixels. The 1FR is the fractional units that were added to CSS for grid, and that will take up 1 unit of the remaining space. So 1FR here is basically saying the rest of the page. And if we hover over our grid class, you'll see here the little purple dotted lines. It might be a little bit hard to see on my screen, but that is our grid. So you can see that our header is taking up just header space and our footer is taking up that, but then the 1FR in the center, so the main HTML element, is taking up the rest of the content. So that just means that our footer sticks nicely to the bottom, and that's a nice little workaround for that age-old CSS problem. Perfect. Excuse me. So now we have implemented our styling and our basic styles for the header and footer. Let's just style up that main HTML page. So import styled from, styled, not form, from styled components, change that to match. I'm not using ESLint or Prettier in here, so you may notice some inconsistencies around my import statements and things like that. I didn't want to implement it and force it upon anyone for the sake of the demo. I wanted them to just be able to write and not worry about saving and things changing and formatting and that kind of thing. So please don't shout at me too much. If you want to implement it, feel free though. It'll be a good practice exercise and see what it looks like when it starts breaking them down, because it does apply rules to these style components as well. So that'd be a good one to play it out with. Anyway, back to the main content. So const, we'll call this homepage styles, and that will equal styled.div, and then we can just wrap our main wrapping div with that. So we want to make this nice and simple, so let's not overcomplicate this. We'll do image, set the max width to be 420 pixels. Oh my god, the amount of typos I am doing today. Feels a bit too big, that, doesn't it? So let's do 350. Much better. We'll set the width to 100%, and then we will say margin. Oh, actually no. We could just throw a text align center on there. Should get it in the middle. Nope, that needs to be on the wrapping. Everything's going to be centered anyway, so we'll just throw it on there. Perfect. And now our H1. We've got the H1's fine, really. I think I might bump it up a little bit. So I'm not going to add this here. I'm going to add that into our global style. So in our typography, say H1, font size. I'm not sure what it is now, so let's just see 3rem. See what happens? Way too big. 2.75 rem. 2.5? Yeah, 2.5, that'll do. And then back to our index page. And then what we can also do here is say, that P is looking okay, to be fair. Yeah, that P will do fine. And let's make a button grid. So button grid, and say display grid. We want to do grid template columns, and we're going to use them fractional units again and say 1FR, 1FR. Set a grid gap of 2 rem. Seem to be using that number a lot. And what that should have done, I haven't actually created the div. So we'll wrap this there. Perfect, so that is the full width of the page at the moment, which now makes me realise we should probably implement a bit of a real grid on here. So normally I'd go and create like a global styles like typography and variables for grids, but as this is only a single page, I'm just going to apply it to the actual home page styles itself. So we'll set the padding to 0.1 rem, just to give it a bit of left and right spacing. And then I think we might set a max width of, say 768 pixels. There's not much in there, and it's a slim website. So there we go. And then our bottom grid. Them buttons are definitely looking a bit too wide, aren't they? So we'll set them to be a max. We'll set that grid to be a max width of 500 pixels. Might be a bit too small. No, that's nice. 500 pixels, and we'll just set the margin to be 0 auto to get it in the center. Perfect. Let's add one last thing here, just to give it a bit of space. Margin top, 4 rem. Let's go for double our usual spacing. Perfect. So we're looking quite nice now. Very basic again. I think we're a bit close to the top actually, aren't we? Let's add a padding top of 4 rem as well. Feel a little bit off center here. That's why we're off center. Why are we off center? We have not applied the margin not auto here, so margin not auto. Padding, that was supposed to be padding top. No, it wasn't, sorry. I wanted to add padding top, so top we'll set to 4 rem, and then right 1, bottom 0, left 1. Perfect. So we've got a nice spacing around this, and as I said, we wanted to create a component in React and implement styles on that, but I imagine you're getting the feel for how this works now. It's very simple to style up individual components like this. So let's create a new component. And the only component we've got to really style at this time is a button. So create button.js. And we'll do the standard React setup. So import React from React. And we will create our button. So const button. Actually, export default function button. And for simplicity, I'm just going to import all the props. And then return button component. So no, I'm not going to import everything. There's no need for that. We'll import children. Save that. And there is our very simple button component. So back to our home page. Let's make use of that component. It's going to minimize this down for now. So we want to import button from components button. And we'll just replace both of these buttons with that. Nothing should change, that's perfect. So back to button. Let's style them up. So we want to import styled from style components. And then we want to create our button style. So constant button styles equals styled dot button. So you have to make sure you say button on this one. And I'll show you what happens if we don't actually, just so you know. And then we want to use button styles. Nothing should change because we haven't implemented any styles. But if we did this incorrectly and said div, they would literally render into a div and it wouldn't be a button. So that's why you just got to be careful around what you use off the styled object. So styled.button. Perfect. So there we have our two buttons. So let's just make them nice. So outline, none, background, none, border, none. Essentially just resetting them here to just be very simple, plain looking things, and then we'll say background. And we'll start colouring them up. So let's have a look at actually what Style Components website does. So they've just got a nice plain white button and black and outlined white button. So we'll do something similar. So if we get our button, we can say border 2 pixels solid black, and we're not going to set it to that background colour, and I'll explain why later because we're going to use variables. And then border radius 3 pixels, should look nice, just a slight radius. Yep. Let's get some padding on there. 1 rem, and we will set the left and right to be 5 rem. It doesn't really matter that we're setting, actually no, we won't set anything on the left and right, we don't need to. We'll just set 1 rem all around because they're just taking up the whole space of that div anyway from our grid styling. And then font size, maybe bump that up a tiny bit. Lovely, so 2 simple buttons. Let's add some pointer. Nope, just taking the sweet time. So now we have a nice cursor, and let's add a hover style. So like I said before, ampersand hover, like we would do in SAS with the ampersand, and that's just saying append hover onto the parent. So the parent in this case is the actual button, so button hover. I want to change the background colour to, let's think, it's currently white, so we'll just say grey. It will not look very nice. The default grey is not a very pleasant colour, but for demo's sake, there we have it. A nice hover style. And then we'll also apply a focus style on the focus, and we'll say box shadow 3 pixels, and we're going to do RGBA 0.5. I think that should look kind of okay. If we focus on that button, yeah, so we get a nice button outline like so. Lovely. Now, the next thing is to just split these colours out to be in our variables. But we need to be careful about naming, and I'll explain why as soon as we've implemented the styles, because we'll jump onto the next thing, which is supplying the theme provider and passing that state around the application. So if we go to our variables, I'm just going to open that up on the right hand side actually, because we're going to be referencing this page. So if I just shove the variables here, we'll add our styles. So we have button background, button colour, so that'll be for the copy, and I think that's it actually, yeah, that's all we need. So the border, let's also add, you never forgot, button focus. That's going to be for that box shadow there. So for the button focus, we'll cut that right out, paste it into button focus, and then copy that here. Let's just size that over a bit so you have a bit more window to see. Well, that should be a tiny bit better. So we're going to say button focus, use that. And then our button background is going to be white. So let's copy the FFF. There we go, and the button color, we'll set that to be black. And now we just want to make use of these, so var button background, and then the border will be button. Do that the same as the text color itself. We got the color anywhere here? No, we don't yet, but we will set this deliberately. And then the background changes on hover, so we want to add a button background hover. I'll set that to use that grey. Where are we, that one? There we are. Hover, hopefully. Ooh. Not quite, something is missing here, so what have I done incorrectly? Border, where are you? 2 pixels solid, let's just check. If I say red there, it works. Yes, it does. And I think it's because we need to supply the whole thing there for the button colour. Obviously that will then break the button colour itself, so that'll be the button border. And the button colour creates a new one. Still incorrect, let's have a peek. So the outlines are working. It's just the border that isn't working, so what's going wrong? Let's do border 2 pixel solid black. Solid. I still had it set to button colour. Perfect. So now we have all of them set up, our hover states work, and we've created a component and we're using its styles. Lovely. So the next part is to set up our theme provider and to be able to pass this around the application so we can change things like these styles depending on if it's light or dark. So inside our index page, let's close this now, we don't need it anymore. We want to create a theme provider. So from our styled, we want to say, we also want theme consumer, I think it is we want. Let me just have music over here. So no, it's not theme consumer, sorry. Keep calling it provider and then saying theme consumer, so theme provider. And what this will do is essentially, I'm putting it on the global, so we're wrapping the entire app with this theme provider. And the reason we're doing that is because anything nested inside this theme provider will have access to it. And we want everything to have access to it. So, theme provider. And then we pass it a theme. You have to name that prop theme to make sure it'll work. That's a style components thing. So now we have theme provider. For some reason that is saying it's never read. It's spelled correctly. It's just been a bit slow. So here we can pass it a theme. So above, we're going to create that theme here. So we'll say const theme is equal to this, and we'll say light. So we're going to create the light theme for our website first. So we'll pass that in here. So theme is going to be theme light. And you'll see why I'm passing it this way and not using the dot syntax shortly. But now everything we put inside this light, all of our styled components like this and these will have access to everything we place inside of here. So let's start by copying everything we have here. Let's throw all of that in there and set up our light theme, because this is already set up to be the light theme. So we'll just take all the styled, the native CSS style things out of this, and we'll just make sure that it's valid syntax. Let's have a button. Control D through there. Perfect. So we're nearly there now. Now we just need to make sure that all of these. So then what's going on here? Of course, we need to wrap these. And the reason we've got this small piece of duplication will become clear when we start implementing the alternative theme. But essentially, we're just mirroring what we had inside our variables. So now we've done that, and we're passing the theme light here, we can go in here, and we need to replace all these values with the values that are coming from our actual theme provider. So delete all of them, and then we want to say, so we open up our, what's it called now? I think it's called a template literal. So we open that up here, and we say theme. Oh no, sorry, we need to get the theme off here. So theme. So this is just destructuring the theme straight out of like the props that's passed to it, and then we want to get the theme dot background color. I think that syntax is correct. Well, we'll find out in a second. So let's see if the background color is getting the right color. So yeah, obviously some things are just broken, but it's because the rest of these don't have variables yet. So if we go to our body, background color is getting far background color. Background color should be on root. Perfect. So that is being passed through correctly. So here we are setting up our theme of light and then passing that object of all them. Then we pass that to our theme provider as the light one. So we're not passing this whole object, we're just passing the light one. And then inside here we get that theme off it and we get the theme.background color. So now that works. Let's just get that in the rest of these. This is the boring, tedious part. So copy underscore color. Guaranteed I will make a typo at some point here. Underscore background. Button underscore background underscore hover. Button color. Oh, there's the typo. How's that happen? Button border. Button focus. So now refresh and everything should look exactly like how it was before. So the reason I've done it like this, inside our index.js file for our component, we can now create more themes. So here we can say light, and we can also create a dark. So now we've got that dark theme. Oh, don't forget your comma. We can pass in the theme dark. And although it looks the same, we are now using this dark theme, but we just need to change these variables around. So if we set that to FFF, top 1 to 000, you'll see that the background should switch, but it has not. So what am I doing wrong? Let's have a look. Theme dark. Let's have a look at the root on here. So background color is still. Copy color should be white, the background color should be black. Perfect. So let's just pass the light in here again and just check that they now switch. Of course they don't. There we go. So if I pass light in there, change that to dark, we now essentially have a light and dark theme, but we can do this a little bit better. So there's a couple of things with these buttons that we could style up as well, because we added all them in here. So the button's background, excuse me, we'll set to black. Button's background hover, we'll leave as grey for now, and then we'll see what we can change that to later that's a bit nicer. The button colour, so this will be the colour of the copy, I think. Oh no, copy colours. So now we can't see the copy of the button, but the background is successfully black. So copy colour, bottom copy color, we want white. We want the border to also be white. Now we just need them focus styles, because the focus styles are currently a shape and black with a slight opacity. So obviously that won't make a difference here. So we want to say 255, 255, and 255. And that will now mean our outline will be slightly white. So perfect. We now successfully have a light and dark theme, and we can switch them around really easily. So light, there we go. So now is one of the main parts of this, is how do we then get this to tie in to, excuse me, how do we now get this to tie into our operating system theming preferences? Because by default we're passing it here and the user doesn't even have a way to change it at the moment. And the answer is prefers color scheme, I think it's called. As soon as I start typing I remember it's not called that, but yeah, prefers color scheme. So we need to basically be able to detect which operating system theme they're using. So go to my preferences. See here I have light and dark. We need to be able to detect which one of them we're using and then pass that into this theme name here. So let's crack on. To do that, I'm going to create this as a hook, and the reason I'm going to create it as a hook is because it's much easier to explain and it's really nice and reusable for future applications you're going to create. You can just copy this hook out then. So let's create a hooks directory. And inside here, create a file called usetheme.js. Inside this use theme, I'm going to do a basic hook setup. So we'll import use effect from React, and then we'll create this hook. So export default. We'll export default function use theme, and then we will pass return theme. Let's get use state as well. So in here we'll say const theme set theme. Structuring this all wrong. Use state, and by default we'll just set it to light for now, but we'll change that later. So what's I can get some sense. Oh, they're gone. Let's return both of them so we can update it as we go. So now if we go into our index file, we want to import that hook, import use theme from too far back I think. Where are we? Ah yeah, we're in the root component, so it's straight into hooks, and then we want to use theme. Perfect. So now in our app we can say const theme set theme equals use theme. Done. So now, oh, we have an error. Let's have a look in the console. Theme provider, theme prop is not provided. What have I broken? Oh, I've named these the same. My mistake. So what would be a better naming convention? We'll call them themes because it's multiple. Keep clicking that. So we'll call that themes, and then we'll say themes light. So now we're getting the light theme. But we don't want to use this light keyword anymore. Say themes theme. So now we're getting the light theme. If we then go into our hook and change the default theme to dark, we're now getting the dark theme. So that is the foundation of our hook at the moment. So now let's use this use effect. And we're going to set it up to be the use effect that just runs once when this component mounts. So that'll be essentially on your page load, since it's the global since it's the global component. And then we want to say, well, what we want to do now is we want to check the prefers color scheme. So if we get the preferred color scheme, and then we say window dot match media. So the syntax is a little bit weird, but you only have to write it once and then it's done. So prefers color scheme, and then hit that there, and then inside our use effect we want, oh, that should be inside our use effect, sorry. So we want to get it when that use effect is run. So we now say window match media prefers, can't type today, color scheme dark dots add event listener. I'll explain this after I wrote it, it's a bit of a weird one. I want to add an event listener for change, and then when we run change to select theme, so we're going to manually select the theme here. So let's create that select theme function. Select theme. We also want to set this to null by default because the user might not have a right theme selected. So this will all break now, because obviously we're trying to access null. So for now, let's just show the light in here so we can actually see the application. Right, so now we want in our const select theme, say if, I think we want to say when the user use effect PCS window.match media prefers color scheme dark, and we're adding an event listener. So what we're doing here, explain this quickly, is we're adding an event listener onto this media query, prefers color scheme dark. So every time our system preferences change, that event listener will run. And then once we're going to select the theme, we then want to check the match media again. So we'll copy that. Window.match media first color scheme light dot matches. Then we want to set the theme, that's the one, to be light. Else we'll set the theme to be dark. So this is a really confusing bit of logic. This isn't being used at this moment in time, so I'll comment that out. So on load, we hit this and we attach an event listener to the window, which listens to prefers color scheme dark, and if that changes, we select the theme. And this will run once on its initial load, so this function will get run straight away to select our initial theme. And here we're checking, do they prefer the color scheme light? If that matches, set it to light. If not, set it to dark. So, back in our index file, this should now work, I think, unless I messed something up, but let's try it. Theme. We have broken it. Theme prop is required. So theme prop is being passed here, but if I, right. So yeah, it's null by default. So what we want to do here is say, if not theme, turn null. And what we're doing here is just saying, if the theme hasn't yet loaded, don't return the app. Once it has, return the app with theme's theme. And we want to do that because we don't want the user to see a jump on the screen of it being light and then dark. It's still not working, so let's have a look. What's going wrong? Use theme. So let's just log inside here what the theme is, because it looks like something is going wrong. When we load it, the theme is null and then nothing else happens, so that's obviously not good. So select theme, let's also run this console.log hit. I don't think it's getting its initial run. Let's change prefers color scheme and see if that listener's working, because I think maybe it's right. Yeah, so you can see it's now working, but the initial load is not working, so let's fix that. So I was wrong in saying before that this will do a run initially. We have to manually do that run, so let's just hit select theme ourselves. There. So on load, we're going to select the theme, and see it's null at the beginning, and then it's dark, so now we can remove that. We know this is all working now. Oops, theme.js. There we go. So now this logic is working. The reason I've got this here, if we uncomment it, is so that we can do a check. And the reason we want to do a check on prefers color scheme itself is to check that the browser supports it. So if we look at can I use, see prefers color scheme, it's, to be fair, the support is very good for it, but there is a few cases where the support doesn't work. So i.e. Opera Mini, Opera Mobile, browser for Android, and a few others. It won't really be a problem, but if you want that backwards compatibility and that support, we want to fix this now, because at the moment it will return null and nothing will ever render because it will always be null. So with that PCS, we can just check if PCS actually, I don't even have Internet Explorer on here to check that this works. Excuse me. So what is the best way of doing this? So that's not it. It's if PCS dot media is not equal to not all, and you'll just have to trust me on this one, but it's something you can definitely test out for yourself with other features that might not be available yet. Then console.log no support for no support for prefers color scheme. So if there's no support for prefers color scheme, we will just set the theme manually to light. Typically the browsers will be light anyway, so yeah. Else, let's run all our normal logic. So I've broken, oh, no support for prefers color scheme. So I've obviously done something wrong here. Safari, oh no, this is Chrome, and Chrome definitely supports this. So what could I be doing wrong? The logic is the wrong way around, that's it. So we want our successful statements in here, and if it doesn't work, inside the else statement, we will set that. Perfect. So now we should still be able to manually change this. So if I go to system preferences again, to general, right, that, perfect, it still works. Now we want that manual override which I mentioned on my website. So if we refresh this page, we will still have that, but we can't manually change it. Luckily, we've exported the set theme function. So what we can do is go back to our index, and we can throw, let's just throw a p tag in here with an on click, excuse me, of select theme. Actually no, let's export that from the actual function, because we don't want to export set theme, because the user could set a theme that doesn't exist, such as green or blue, when we only have a light or dark theme. So we want to restrict that down a little bit. So let's say toggle theme here, and on click we want to toggle theme, and then in our set theme we'll rename that to toggle theme, and and let's go back to our use theme selector. We'll export toggle theme and we'll create that function up here. Const toggle theme. Say if theme is equal to light, and set theme to dark. Else set theme to light. Perfect. Center that as well. Let's use our nice little button component for it as well, why not? Perfect, so toggle theme, container styles. Let's wrap that in here and we'll get it all centered and looking nice. So inside this, we'll say dot button. Stand center, and we'll just have a margin top. Now hopefully, when we click this, oh actually, I don't think we passed that through to our button. No, we did not. So on click, and we will just simply say on click is equal to on click. Lovely. Now, we can toggle our theme. Lovely. The problem is now, because there's always a problem, is system preferences. If we look at my settings and on a dark theme, the website is currently light. If I refresh, it goes back to dark. But if I toggle that theme to light, I don't want it to change every time I refresh the page. So we can make use of the local storage API to circumnavigate that issue. So if we go to our use theme, excuse me, we can say here, got to remember now if it's window local storage, yes. So local storage dot set item and dot get item is how we append items into our applications. Local storage here. Looking there now, currently there's nothing in there. So what we can do is say, whenever we select a theme, we also want to set that into our local storage. So local storage dot set item theme. I think it's double, yeah, it's theme to be white. I'll set theme to be dark. And then when we do that, we also want to set it on the manual toggle theme. Actually, we don't want it in here. We only want it on the manual toggle, because if we set it there, every time they load the page, it will be permanently set to that theme. So set theme like that. There we go. So now only when the user toggles a theme will it overwrite. Toggle to white, refresh, still black. Right. We need to implement the get item. So first thing we need to check is our preferred theme. So here we do const preferred theme equals local storage dot get item, and we want to get the theme. So if there is a theme in there, we want to use the preferred theme. So if preferred theme, we want to set the theme straight away to whatever that is. Else if we want to check the media, and then last but not least, we'll manually set it to light. So for now, we can delete that out because we know that it's working now. Perfect. So as you'll see, it's just switched to light, and that's because in here our theme is light. If I delete that value and refresh, we'll go back to my operating system preference. So if I go back to system preferences, I can now toggle between light and dark. So if I go to light, refresh the page, we're still light, perfect. And if I toggle the theme, we're dark, and I can refresh the page and we stay dark. So I think that covers the basics of setting up a style of components, creating some hooks in React. We've created some basic components. We have passed a global theme object down into our theme provider. So here. So we'll run over the app quickly just to cover everything that we've got from it. So in our default application, we have a theme provider and we're passing in a theme of either light or dark. That theme we're getting from our theme hook, which we've just made, which essentially its entire purpose is just to return back light or dark. And it does all the logic inside that hook, nothing else, and it's nice and separated away in that hook. And that hook's essentially doing three things. It's checking if we have preferred core scheme support, if we do, what theme they have, and if they have local storage, because they've manually selected a theme already, then use that. So it's doing them three things, and then selecting that theme here. So it's then passing whichever theme we've selected into the provider, which is then later on getting picked up by our variables file, injected into each one of the CSS variables. And then we're manually, everywhere else in the application where we're using them variables, just using them as plain CSS variables. Really nice, really fast, really simple. And then when we switch these toggle themes, or we switch our operating system theme, it is just overwriting these inside the main root declaration inside variables. So thank you for watching. If you found this useful, please give it a thumbs up. If there's something you'd change, please comment, because I'd love to see the ways that other people are doing this. If you have any questions, reach out to me on Twitter @KieranMD95. I would be happy to speak to you.